The first time I heard the whispers, I blamed it on the rain. The soft, rhythmic patter against the roof, the wind slipping through the cracks, I told myself that's all it was. But then, I heard my name. Faint, distant, slithering through the floorboards from the locked basement below. I held my breath, listening. The whispers stopped. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, knock, knock, knock. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the basement door. My blood turned to ice. I wasn't alone. Something was down there. Something that knew my name. And worst of all, it wanted me to listen. Before the fear begins, hit like and subscribe, don't miss the chills. Tell us where you're watching from, and brace yourself for stories so terrifying, they'll haunt your night. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It came down in an endless curtain, soaking the earth, drumming against my windshield as I pulled into the driveway. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at my new home. The house wasn't much, just a modest 2-story rental on the edge of town. The kind of place no one really paid attention to. The landlord had given me a great deal, almost too great, and I had jumped at the opportunity. I should have questioned why. Instead, I had signed the lease without hesitation. And now, sitting in my car, watching the rain wash over the house, something about it felt off. The windows were dark. The paint on the siding was peeling. The air smelled damp, like the earth itself was rotting. It was old. That was expected. But why did it feel like it was watching me? I forced myself out of the car, grabbing my duffel bag and stepping onto the porch. The wood groaned under my weight, and for a brief moment, I swore I felt a vibration beneath my feet, like something shifting just beneath the house. Shaking it off, I turned the key and stepped inside. The air was still. Too still. No hum of a refrigerator, no ticking clock. Just the faint echo of my own breath. The house had been furnished, though sparsely. A single couch, a dusty coffee table, and an old grandfather clock against the far wall, one that wasn't ticking. I checked my phone. 3:09 p.m. I had the whole evening ahead of me to unpack, settle in, and make the place feel like home. So why did I feel like I wasn't alone? I did a quick tour of the house, passing through the living room, kitchen, and small dining area before heading upstairs. The second floor had 2 bedrooms. Mine had a large window overlooking the backyard, though I couldn't see much beyond the rain. The other room was empty, its walls stained with something dark. Probably water damage, I told myself. I was about to head back downstairs when I noticed something. At the end of the hall, barely visible in the dim light, was a third door. It wasn't part of the house's layout I had seen before. I hesitated, a strange unease curling in my stomach. I reached for the knob and turned it. Locked. My unease deepened. I hadn't noticed a basement in the listing. Why would the landlord keep it locked? Something about that door felt wrong. Like it didn't belong there. Like it wasn't supposed to be touched. I stepped back, rubbing my arms as a sudden chill ran down my spine. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Faint. Coming from the other side of the door. I spun around so fast my vision blurred. My heart pounded. The house was empty. I knew that. But I wasn't imagining things. I had heard something. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh. I was probably just exhausted from the move. Hearing things. That had to be it. But then, the whisper came again. Only this time, it said my name. Daniel. I didn't open the door. I should have left right then and there. Instead, I called the landlord. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Daniel. His voice was gruff, like he had just woken up. Yeah, hey, I just moved in. Everything looks fine, but, there's a door upstairs. At the end of the hall. It's locked. Is that the basement? Silence. A long one. Then, listen to me carefully, son. Don't open that door. A chill ran down my spine. Why? I asked. Just don't, he said, voice flat. There's nothing down there for you. The call ended. I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting into knots. The basement was locked. The landlord refused to explain why, and something inside of it had whispered my name. The grandfather clock. I didn't sleep that night. The rain kept falling, heavier now, filling the house with an almost drowning sound. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed. But I didn't own a clock. Slowly, I sat up, listening. Another chime. It was coming from the grandfather clock downstairs. The one that wasn't ticking when I arrived. Heart pounding, I stepped out into the hallway. The house was dark. Too dark. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching unnaturally. I crept down the stairs, each step groaning beneath my weight. The air felt colder. The clock stood in the corner of the living room, its hands frozen at 3:12 a.m. I reached out, hesitated, then touched the glass. The second I did, the clock started ticking. A slow, deep sound that filled the entire house. Then, from upstairs, a loud thud. Right outside my bedroom. I spun around, my breath hitching in my throat. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the basement door. The first night. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The knocking stopped. But the whispers didn't. They slithered through the house, curling around me like smoke. They weren't coming from one place. They were everywhere. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The clock froze at 3:12 a.m. The air felt normal again. But I knew better. Something was in this house. Something that wasn't human. And for some reason, it knew my name. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed against the roof, an endless rhythm that blurred time itself. I had been in this house for 3 days now, and sleep had been a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with the whispers. Not with the knocking that came from the basement door at 3 a.m. I tried to ignore it the first night. Maybe it was the old house settling, or maybe the wind had rattled something loose. But the second night, the whispers got louder. And this time, I heard footsteps. 3:12 a.m. the knock at the basement door. I had just begun to drift into an uneasy sleep when a sound snapped me awake. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't loud, but it was intentional. I held my breath, straining to listen. The rain pounded harder outside, but beneath it, somewhere in the depths of the house, I swore I heard it. A whisper. It was distant but distinct, layered, like more than one voice speaking at once. My name slithered through the darkness. Daniel. My stomach clenched. My pulse hammered in my ears. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't the house settling. Something was down there. I sat up slowly, every nerve in my body on edge. The air felt heavy, pressing against my skin like something unseen was watching. The knock came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, measured, closer. I turned my head toward the hallway. The basement door was barely visible in the darkness, just a faint outline at the end of the corridor. It stood there like an open wound, blacker than the shadows around it. Then, I saw it. The door was open. Not much, just an inch. A sliver of darkness peeking through. But I knew for certain I had locked it before bed. A breath hitched in my throat. And then, the whispers stopped. The house fell into suffocating silence. No rain. No wind. Just an unnatural stillness, thick and pressing. I forced myself to move, grabbing the flashlight from my nightstand. My hands were clammy as I flicked it on, casting a dim yellow glow down the hall. I swung my legs over the bed. The floor felt too cold. Like the warmth had been sucked out of the house. I took one hesitant step forward. Then another. The basement door waited at the end of the hall, cracked open like an invitation. I swallowed hard and reached for it. As soon as my fingers brushed the wood, the door swung open violently. A gust of ice-cold air slammed into me, knocking the breath from my lungs. The flashlight flickered. For a split second, I thought I saw something move in the darkness. Not a shape. Not a person. Just shifting shadows, curling and twisting, pulling away from the light. I stumbled back, gripping the doorknob with a shaking hand. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then, just as suddenly as it opened, the door slammed shut. Hard. So hard the walls shook. I jumped, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The flashlight's beam quivered across the door's surface. And then, tap, tap, tap. The sound came from inside the basement. No, 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 no. I took another step back. My instincts screamed at me to run, to leave, to get the hell out of this house. But my body refused to move. I could still hear it. Not just the tapping, not just the whispers. Something was breathing on the other side of the door. Low, ragged, waiting. My phone glitches. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, nearly dropping it as I unlocked the screen. The signal was gone. No bars. No Wi-Fi. I clicked on my message app, trying to send a text to anyone. But the second I started typing, the screen glitched. The words I was writing disappeared, replaced by a single incoming message. Unknown number. Don't listen to them. My breath caught. Another message followed. Don't open the door again. I dropped the phone. The whispers rushed back. Louder. Urgent. Right outside the door. I did the only thing I could. I ran. The house watches. I locked my bedroom door behind me, pressing my back against it as my chest heaved. I felt stupid, like a child afraid of the dark. But this wasn't just fear. It was something worse. Something was wrong with this house. And I wasn't alone. I tried to calm my breathing, staring at my phone screen. It was normal now. No messages from the unknown number. Like they had never been there at all. I hesitated, then opened my audio recorder. I didn't know why, I just felt like I had to. I set my phone on the nightstand and hit record. Then, I turned off the lights and forced myself to close my eyes. The playback. Morning came, dull and grey. The rain still hadn't stopped. I sat up in bed, every muscle in my body aching from tension. Had I dreamed it all? The whispers, the messages, the knocking. I reached for my phone and opened the audio recording from last night. The first few minutes were just silence, with the occasional shift of fabric as I turned in my sleep. Then, at 3:12 a.m., it started. A faint rustling sound. Then a whisper. Daniel. My stomach dropped. Another whisper. More voices. Layered, overlapping, crawling over each other. I turned up the volume, trying to make out the words. And then, right before the recording cut off, a final whisper, so close to the microphone it made my skin crawl. Let me out. The basement door is open again. I nearly threw my phone across the room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned toward my bedroom door, pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't want to check. I didn't want to know. But I had to. I stepped into the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The air felt thick, like the house was holding its breath. The basement door was open. Wider this time. Darkness spilled from the stairwell, stretching toward me like fingers reaching out. A single thought whispered through my mind. It wants me to come down. 3:12 a.m. The whispers return. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment, I was staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the whispers, the knocking, the grandfather clock's impossible chime. The next, I was jerked awake by a sound that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the wind. It was a child laughing. I shot up in bed, my breath caught in my throat. The room was pitch dark. I grabbed my phone. 3:12 a.m. A single notification glowed on my screen. Unknown number. Come downstairs. I went cold. No. No, no, no. The previous message from this number, the one that had told me not to open the basement door, was gone. Like it had never existed. That's when I heard it again. A faint, wet whisper. Daniel. It came from beneath me. From the basement. The basement door is open. Again. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to check. But some awful, magnetic pull forced me to. The floor felt wrong under my feet, like the house had shifted, like it was breathing. The hallway was dark, but I could see it. The basement door. It was wide open. Wider than before. The stairs leading downward were just a black void. A thick, unnatural darkness, swallowing the weak glow of my flashlight. I should have run. Instead, I stepped closer. The descent begins. I hesitated at the threshold, staring down into the abyss. The air smelled wrong. Damp wood, stale air, and something else. Something rotting. I lifted my flashlight, aiming it downward. The beam barely reached the bottom. The stairs stretched endlessly, disappearing into the dark. But as I stared, I saw movement. Something shifted down there. Slow, subtle, but it was there. And then, the door slammed shut behind me. Trapped below. I spun around, heart hammering. The door was gone. Not just locked, gone. The wall behind me was solid. As if the basement door had never existed. I swallowed hard, turning back toward the darkness. A noise drifted up from below. Not whispers. Not knocking. Footsteps. Coming up the stairs. Slow. Uneven. Like something was dragging itself toward me. The painting on the wall. I had no choice. I had to move. I stepped carefully down the stairs, my breathing shallow, my skin crawling. The basement was wrong. Not just abandoned, forgotten. Moldy furniture. Torn wallpaper. Dust so thick it clung to my lungs. But there was something else. A painting on the far wall. It was massive, stretching from floor to ceiling. It showed a family of 4. A man, a woman, 2 children. But their faces were smeared. Like someone had dragged their fingers across the paint before it dried, distorting them beyond recognition. I stepped closer, my pulse pounding. The air shifted. A voice behind me whispered, so close to my ear, I could feel the breath. "You shouldn't be here." The shadow in the reflection. I spun around. Nothing. The basement was empty. But when I turned back to the painting, my stomach dropped. There was something else in it now. A 5th figure. Tall. Dark. Standing behind the family. It hadn't been there before. I lifted my flashlight, my hand shaking. And then, the glass covering the painting reflected movement. Something was behind me. I am not alone. I didn't think. I ran. Darting past the painting, past the broken furniture, deeper into the basement. Something was following me. I could hear it, a wet, dragging sound. My flashlight flickered. For a fraction of a second, I saw it. A figure. Tall. Malformed. Its face was wrong, too long, mouth stretched too wide. And it was smiling. The hatch in the floor. I spotted something ahead, a wooden hatch set into the basement floor. The same hatch from the child's drawing. I lunged for it, ripping at the old metal handle. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the whispering returned. Faster. Louder. More voices, layering over each other in a sickening, chaotic chorus. "Let us out. You shouldn't be here. He sees you." I slammed my fist against the hatch. It shifted. And then it opened on its own. The staircase that shouldn't exist. A second staircase stretched downward. Deeper than the basement. Into pure, impenetrable darkness. Cold air rushed upward, carrying a scent so foul, it made my stomach turn. And far, far below, I heard something move. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Something breathing. Deep. Heavy. Waiting. The cold hand on my shoulder. A hand ice cold, skeletal, clamped down on my shoulder. I screamed. I spun around. Nothing was there. But the voices didn't stop. They were inside me now. Rattling in my skull, clawing at my thoughts. I had to get out. I turned back to the hatch. And then, from the darkness below, a voice called up to me. A voice I recognized. My own. "Daniel, help me." The final push. Panic flooded my body. No, that wasn't me. It was something else. Something pretending. I grabbed the hatch door, slamming it shut. The whispers screamed. The air shook. And then, everything went silent. The basement door returns. I turned. The basement door was back. Not gone. Not locked. Just standing there. Open. An escape. I didn't question it. I ran. I burst through the door, stumbling into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. My chest heaved. My skin felt wrong. Like something had touched me down there. But I was out. And the whispers had stopped. The final message. I staggered to my bedroom, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. A new message. Unknown number. You shouldn't have done that. The timestamp. 3:12 a.m. I looked toward the hallway. The basement door was open again. And this time, there were footprints leading out. 3:13 a.m. The silence after the storm. The house was dead quiet. Not just silent, but wrongfully still. No rain. No wind. Not even the faint hum of the refrigerator. Just nothing. I stood frozen at my bedroom door, my breath coming in uneven gasps. The open basement door at the end of the hall taunted me, but it wasn't the worst part. The footprints. They were wet, leading from the basement entrance, trailing across the wooden floor. They weren't mine, and they were still forming. Right in front of me. Like something invisible was walking toward my room. Something is in the house. My entire body locked up. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, but the wet, glistening footprints said otherwise. One step. Then another. Then another. Each footprint pressed into the floor as if something, was standing right in front of me. Then, the door behind me creaked. The closet. My closet. A slow, deliberate sound, like something was pushing it open from the inside. I spun around so fast I nearly fell, my flashlight trembling in my hands. The closet door was ajar. It had been shut when I went to bed. I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. Somewhere deep inside me, I already knew. Something was hiding in there, and it wanted me to look. The closet door moves on its own. I held my breath. The door shifted. Just a fraction of an inch. The air grew colder. Then, a whisper. From inside the closet. Daniel. I couldn't move. I didn't want to move. But my flashlight flickered. And in that split second, I saw it. A figure. Crouched inside. Too long. Too still. Head tilted at an unnatural angle, its face completely obscured by darkness. Then, the door slammed shut. I staggered backward, my chest heaving. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get the hell out of this house. But before I could react, I heard something even worse. A second whisper. He sees you now. The wet handprint on the wall. I ran. Straight out of my room, down the hall, past the basement door. I didn't stop until I was in the living room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I sucked in ragged breaths, barely able to think. And then, I saw it. A wet handprint on the wall. Right beside the grandfather clock. My stomach churned. Because the fingers, they were too long. The clock starts ticking again. Chime. I flinched. The grandfather clock. The one that had been dead silent when I moved in. It ticked now. A slow, rhythmic click-click-click. The hands, frozen at 3:12 a.m. since the first night, began to move. 1 second. Then another. Then another. I swallowed hard. I had to get out. The front door won't open. I grabbed the front door handle and yanked. Locked. No, jammed. Like something was holding it shut from the other side. My breath quickened. I turned back toward the house, scanning every shadow. The air felt thicker now. Like the house itself was watching me. And then, a sound behind me. The basement stairs creak. Slow. Deliberate. A footstep on the basement stairs. Then another. And another. Something was coming up. I turned just in time to see a shadow moving in the basement doorway. Not fast. Not sudden. But crawling. A long-fingered hand gripped the frame. Pale. Stretched. Another step. A second hand, curling over the edge. Then, a face. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. Its skin was wrong. Too tight. Too pale. Its mouth too wide. A thin, stretched out smile. It wasn't human. And it was coming for me. The walls start bleeding. The house shook. The walls groaned. A deep, Inhuman whisper rattled the air. Then, the wallpaper split open. Dark liquid seeped from the cracks. Thick, oozing, dripping down in slow, viscous streaks. My stomach turned. The walls weren't walls anymore. They were alive. And they were bleeding. The whispers are inside my head. I clutched my skull, gasping for breath. The whispers, they were inside me now. Not coming from the basement. Not coming from the house. They were inside my head. Louder. Faster. Overlapping. 1,000 voices, speaking at once. You let him out. It's too late now. You belong to him. My vision blurred. I fell to my knees. And then, something touched my shoulder. The hand that shouldn't exist. I snapped my head up. The hand was still on me, but it wasn't mine. It was too long, too thin. The skin, grey and leathery. The fingers, curling over my shoulder. I turned slowly, and there it was. Standing behind me, watching, smiling. And then it spoke. Not in whispers, not in breathless murmurs, but in my own voice. Daniel, you never left. The last message. Darkness rushed over me. A crashing sound. A void swallowing me whole. I woke up gasping. I was in my bed. The house was silent. Normal. Like nothing had happened. Had it all been a dream? I sat up, heart hammering. And then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should have stayed asleep. I froze. Slowly, I turned toward the hallway. The basement door was open. And this time, there was someone standing at the bottom of the stairs. Waiting. 3:14 a.m. The figure at the bottom of the stairs. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The basement door was wide open, and at the bottom of the stairs, something was standing there. Not moving. Not breathing. Just watching. The shadows twisted around it, making it impossible to see clearly. But I could feel its presence. A thick, suffocating force pressing against my skin. And then, it took a step upward. Something is coming. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering against my skull. The thing at the bottom of the stairs moved differently, like it wasn't used to its own body. Another step. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. Like it was enjoying this. Like it wanted me to run. I gripped the edge of the doorway, forcing myself to move. I couldn't let it reach me. I turned. Slam. The door slammed shut on its own. The impact shook the entire house. And then, the doorknob turned. The scratching at the door. I took another step back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The knob twisted violently now, rattling against the wood. Then, the scratching began. Long, deliberate strokes, like fingernails dragging down the wood. Then another. And another. And then a voice. Not a whisper. Not a breath. But my own voice. Daniel, let me in. The shadows move on their own. I turned, desperate for an exit. The house was different now. The furniture had shifted. The walls looked too long. The ceiling felt lower. Like the entire house was closing in. The shadows in the corners of the room moved. I wasn't alone. And then, the lights flickered. And I saw it. A reflection. In the hallway mirror. A figure standing behind me. It wasn't me. The reflection is wrong. I turned slowly. Nothing. But in the mirror, the figure was still there. It moved when I didn't. Its head tilted. Then, its mouth began to move. But the words weren't coming from the mirror. They were coming from behind me. You're already in the basement, Daniel. My chest seized. I spun around. And the room collapsed into darkness. The house is alive. I wasn't in my house anymore. I was somewhere else. A vast, blackened void. The walls pulsed. The air hummed. I was inside something living. Something breathing. The whispers returned. 1,000 voices, layered over each other. He is awake. You opened the door. You never left. My pulse pounded. I wasn't dreaming. This was real. And I wasn't alone. The thing in the darkness. A sound behind me. Wet. dripping, like something crawling closer. I turned, and I saw it. The thing from the basement. Only now, it wasn't in the basement anymore. It was with me, and I finally saw its face. It looks like me. My stomach dropped, because the thing was me, or at least, something trying to be me. Its features were stretched. Its mouth was too wide. Its eyes were black holes. And yet, its voice was mine. You let me out. The room shook. The walls split open. And I finally understood. I was never supposed to leave. Because I never left. The basement wasn't a basement. The truth hit me all at once. The basement was never a basement. It was a door. A way in. A way out. But not for me. For it. And when I opened that door, I didn't let something out. I let myself in. I was never in the house. I was in the thing pretending to be the house. And now, it had me. Completely. I woke up screaming. Back in my bed. The house was quiet. The rain had stopped. It was morning. Had it been a dream? I grabbed my phone. One new message. Unknown number. You were never supposed to wake up. I felt sick. Slowly, I turned toward the hallway. The basement door was wide open. And this time, there was something standing in the doorway. Smiling. Waiting. For me. 7 a.m. The house feels different. I hadn't moved for hours. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the open basement door in the hallway. It was wider now. Like it was inviting me back in. Like it knew I wouldn't be able to resist. The footprints were gone. The whispers had stopped. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. Pressing. Like something had changed while I slept. Like the house wasn't the same house anymore. The reflection that shouldn't be there. I turned to my bedroom mirror. I don't know why. I just felt like I had to. The reflection was off. Not wrong at first. Just slightly delayed. My breath fogged up the glass a second after I exhaled. My fingers twitched, but the reflection hesitated before mirroring me. I leaned closer. And then, the reflection smiled. I didn't. I staggered backward, my chest seizing with panic. The thing in the mirror tilted its head. Its smile widened. And then, in my voice, it whispered, "Daniel, you're looking in the wrong place." The phone call that shouldn't exist. I bolted from the room. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, the vibration rattling against my bones. Unknown caller. I hesitated. Then answered. I barely got out a hello, before I heard breathing. Slow. Heavy. Not human. Then, my own voice. "Daniel, you're still asleep." My stomach dropped. The call cut off. The screen glitched. And then, a new message appeared. Unknown number. Come downstairs. The basement calls me back. I turned toward the hall. The basement door was wider now. Like a gaping wound. Like it was pulling the rest of the house inside it. I didn't want to go down there. But I had to. My feet moved on their own. The air got colder. The rain had started again, but it sounded wrong. Like it was coming from inside the house. Step by step, I approached the staircase. And then, something moved in the darkness below. The thing wearing my face. I froze. A figure stepped into the dim light. I felt my stomach twist. It was me. Or at least, something that looked like me. But it wasn't perfect. The smile was too wide. The eyes were too empty. And the skin looked stretched, like it had been peeled off something else and forced to fit. It lifted a hand in a mock wave. Then, in my voice, it whispered, "Come closer. A game I can't win." I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. But I didn't know if I was asleep anymore. The figure took a step forward. And as it moved, I felt something inside my chest shift. Like it was pulling something out of me. Like it was taking something back. I stepped backward, but the walls of the house moved with me. I wasn't in control anymore. And then, the thing stopped. It stared at me with those wrong eyes. And in a voice that sounded almost bored, it said, "You're almost ready." Then it stepped backward into the dark. And vanished. The house is changing. The moment it disappeared, the house came alive. The walls pulsed. The floor shifted beneath my feet. A deep, guttural groan echoed from inside the walls like something was waking up. And then, a voice. Not whispered. Not mine. A voice so deep, so ancient, it shook the house itself. It's almost time. My chest locked. I turned toward the basement. And at the bottom of the stairs, a door had appeared. One that hadn't been there before. One that I knew was meant for me. I see what's really down there. I don't remember walking toward it. 1 second, I was in the hallway. The next, I was standing at the bottom of the stairs. The door was old. Heavy. It hummed. Like it had been waiting for me to find it. I reached for the handle. But before I could touch it, the voice came again. Are you sure you want to see? The door unlocked itself. And swung open. The heart of the house. What I saw wasn't a basement. It was something bigger. A void. An endless, shifting mass of tunnels and rooms, pulsing like a living thing. The walls were stitched together from something not human. And at the center of it all, a shape. Huge. Breathing. With 1,000 shifting faces, all whispering at once. And one of them was mine. The final realization. I staggered backward. The faces, they were trapped. Every person who had ever lived here. Every person who had ever opened the basement door. They weren't dead. They were still here. Living. Suffering. Becoming part of the house. And now, it wanted me. The final choice. The house shuddered. The walls closed in. The voice returned, softer this time. Choose, Daniel. I turned back to the door. It was still open. I could still run. But I knew the truth now. If I left, something else would take my place. The house needed someone. And if it wasn't me, it would be someone else. The last thing I see. The faces in the walls watched me. Their mouths moved in unison. Stay. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Then, I turned and ran. The final message. I stumbled out of the basement. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door vanished. The walls stopped bleeding. The whispers ended. The house was normal again. Like nothing had ever happened. I grabbed my phone. One new message. Unknown number. You should have stayed. I turned toward the hallway. The mirror on the wall reflected something behind me. A smiling figure. Watching. Waiting. For the next person to open the door. 8 a.m. I should be free. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The house stood behind me, eerily quiet. Normal. Like none of it had ever happened. The basement door was gone. The whispers had stopped. The house had let me go. At least, that's what I tried to tell myself. So why couldn't I bring myself to start the engine? Why did I still feel like something was watching me? The wrong reflection. I glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. My reflection was wrong. At first, it looked normal. But then, it blinked. Before I did, I sucked in a breath, my chest locking up. The reflection's head tilted. Then it smiled. A slow, deliberate stretch of the mouth, too wide. I turned around instantly. Nothing was there. Just the empty back seat. I looked at the mirror again. The reflection was normal now. Except for one thing. The backseat door was open. I never opened it. A message I shouldn't have read. My phone buzzed. I jumped. A new message. Unknown number. You never left. My stomach twisted. I looked at the house one last time. It looked dead. Like an abandoned shell. Like it had already moved on to someone else. I wasn't going to wait. I turned the key. The car roared to life. I sped down the driveway, never looking back. Back to the real world. Or so I thought. The highway stretched before me, empty and endless. The rain had stopped. The sky was a dull grey. It should have felt like freedom. But something was wrong. The radio glitched. Every station played the same thing, static. The air felt heavy, and the further I drove, the more I had this sinking, horrible feeling. Like I hadn't really left. Like the house was still with me. The wrong address. I reached the city after an hour of driving. I pulled up to a coffee shop, somewhere normal, public, safe. I just needed people around me. I just needed to feel real again. I parked, grabbed my phone, and checked my GPS. And then, my heart stopped. The address at the top of the screen wasn't for the coffee shop. It wasn't for the city. It was my house. The house I just left. The house that should be miles away. My blood turned to ice. I looked up. And the coffee shop was gone. I was parked right back in front of the house. The door follows me. I couldn't breathe. I had driven for an hour. I had left. I had escaped. So how was I back here? I turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. The car was dead. The sky was darker now. The house looked bigger. And then, a new message appeared. Unknown number. Come inside. I am not alone. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. I wasn't going to sit in the car and wait. I had to face this. I stepped outside. The air was wrong. The trees around the house weren't moving. The wind had stopped. And then, I saw it. Footprints. Leading from my car to the front door. But they weren't mine. They were already there. Waiting for me. The house wants me back. The door was wide open. A mouth waiting to swallow me whole. Inside, everything looked the same. The couch. The clock. The dim hallway stretching toward the basement door. Except, the basement door wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was in the living room. Like the house was rearranging itself. Like it was making sure I had nowhere else to go. The grandfather clock ticked loudly. The hands still stuck at 3:12 a.m. Then, a whisper. Daniel, welcome home. I never left. I staggered backward, shaking my head. No, this isn't happening. I grabbed my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. But my contacts were gone. Every number. Every message. Except for one. Unknown number. Stop fighting. I gritted my teeth, refusing to believe this. I turned, ready to run. But the front door? It was gone. Just a blank wall where it used to be. The door has moved. The house was shifting again. The walls pulsed. The ceiling creaked. And then, the basement door opened on its own. Waiting. Like a gaping wound in the fabric of reality. A slow, thick whisper curled through the air. You never left, Daniel. I turned back to the mirror on the wall. And my reflection wasn't mine anymore. The last warning. The thing in the mirror tilted its head. It raised a hand. I didn't. It grinned. And then, in my own voice, it whispered. He sees you now. The lights exploded. Darkness swallowed the house. And from deep within the basement, something started climbing the stairs. The final message. I fell backward, gasping. I could hear it moving toward me. Slow. Steady. Then my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. It's time. I turned toward the basement, heart pounding. And standing at the top of the stairs was me, smiling, waiting for the real me to finally accept it. 3:12 a.m. The final encounter. I was trapped. The front door was gone. The walls had shifted. And standing at the top of the basement stairs was me. Not an illusion. Not a reflection. Not a trick. It was me. Or at least, something that had my face. It grinned, that too wide smile stretching unnaturally. You understand now, don't you? It whispered. The air thickened. The house breathed. And deep below, in the darkness of the basement, something else stirred. Something ancient. Something waiting. For me. The house is alive. I backed away. My doppelganger didn't move. It just watched me. Calm. Patient. Like it had already won. I turned, scanning the house for any kind of escape, a window, another door, anything. But the house had changed. The walls pulsed, their surfaces rippling like flesh. The floor shifted beneath my feet. Everything smelled wrong. Like decay. Like something rotting beneath the surface. "Why are you running?" the other me asked. "You knew this was coming." I shook my head violently. No, I refused to accept this. This wasn't real. I just needed to wake up. "The house speaks to me." A deep groan echoed through the walls, rattling my bones. Then, a whisper. Not from my doppelganger. From everywhere. "You were chosen, Daniel." My stomach dropped. "You let us in." The voice wasn't one person. It was thousands. Layered. Echoing. The voices of everyone who had ever lived here. Everyone who had ever opened the basement door. And they were inside the house now. Inside me. The basement is no longer a basement. I turned back toward the basement stairs. The darkness at the bottom had changed. It wasn't a staircase anymore. It was a void. A swirling mass of shadows, shifting faces, and endless whispers. It was alive. And it was hungry. I knew, somehow, that this was the heart of the house. Not wood. Not brick. But something older. Something that had been here long before the house was built. And now, it had me. The truth of the house. "You never left," my doppelganger whispered. "Because you never moved in." I froze. "What? You were always here." I shook my head. No, that wasn't true. I remembered moving in. I remembered signing the lease. I remembered the landlord's warning. But even as I thought about it, the memories felt distant. Like a dream slowly slipping away. Like they didn't belong to me. Because they didn't. I was never real. A sickening realization hit me. I wasn't the first. I was just the next. The house needed someone new. Someone to replace the last person it consumed. And now, it had me. The house wasn't haunted. The house wasn't cursed. The house was alive. And I was part of it now. The door that never opens. I staggered backward, my vision swimming. I wasn't me. I was just a memory wearing a body. A reflection of someone who had lived here before. And the house had been feeding on me from the moment I walked in. Every time I slept. Every time I heard the whispers. Every time I saw something that wasn't there. It wasn't trying to scare me away. It was breaking me down. So I could be rebuilt as something else. So I could take someone else's place. So the next poor soul who moved in would see my face in the mirror. The choice that isn't a choice. "It's time," the other me whispered. "Choose." The house shuddered. The walls groaned. The basement stretched wider, the darkness pulsing. Waiting. I had two choices. Go into the void. Or become the thing standing in front of me. There was no escape. I would either fall into the house forever. Or take its place. I had to decide. Now. The final step. My doppelganger reached out a hand. An invitation. A warning. A promise. The voices in the walls whispered in unison. "Stay." I looked at the basement one last time. I could see the others down there. Their faces melted together. Eyes hollow. Mouths open in eternal screams. They had all made their choice. Now it was my turn. I make my decision. I took a deep breath. And I stepped forward. The final message. I woke up. In a different bed. The morning light streamed through the window. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Normal. For a moment, I thought, maybe it was all a dream. Then I heard the whispers. Not in the basement. Not behind a door. Inside my head. And when I looked in the mirror, the reflection wasn't mine. It was his. The last person who had lived here. The last person the house had taken. And now, I knew. I would be next. Until someone else moved in. Until they opened the door. And when they did, I would be the one waiting.